All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I am Alex, and I'm joined by an incredibly special guest for part 3, the trilogy. You know, the trilogy normally is supposed to be the best at the end. Troy is here to take some questions, to talk a little bit about the game. We'll have some things that we talk about, we don't talk about. We want to keep it generally spoiler free. So, we're going to probably dance around any comments or questions that have to do with the ending and stuff like that. The game technically has only been out for a week for some, even though a lot of people seem to, everybody on the planet probably got the deluxe edition, but I don't think everybody's beaten it yet. So, well, Troy, I said this to you right before we went live, but a couple things. Number one, thank you so much for honestly everything and for being on yet again. Number two, sincerely, you guys did it. I said that before, but it's out. And that'll probably be the first thing we talk about. How does it feel? And how does it feel to see from people like, this could have gone wrong. It didn't have to go this way. This was an enormous success from sales, from just people's enjoyment. What's it like?
Well, it's probably a good thing to kind of start out by saying, hey, thank you for having me on the show again for the third time. So I really appreciate that. And even though I did work on the project, it's also worth pointing out that I haven't worked on it for almost 2 years now.
Yes.
Right. That means that I'm not a WB representative. I don't represent Avalanche software. It's been a while, and it's good to get those caveats out there so that anybody thinks, oh, Troy said something in this live stream with
Right.
Alex, and they think that it's somehow official. It's not. I'm not an official representative. In fact, I got a few things wrong since I've been off the project when I was on Twitch, where I would speculate and I would get it wrong and say, whoops, that was wrong. So just remind everybody I'm not an official representative.
Right.
That being said, I have talked to some of the folks who have worked on the team, and their response right now is I think they're kind of blown away by how well it's being received. I mean, they knew that they were onto something because of early play where people were testing it or play testing it. They were coming back with this notion of, wow, it really feels like the Wizarding World. You guys really captured something. But until you actually get it out there in front of the fans, you're not really sure. And now that it is out in front of fans, and so many fans are like, yes, this is very close, or the sort of game that we really wanted. I think there's a lot of just celebration back at Avalanche. Yay, we made most of the fans happy. I know you can't make everybody happy, but we made most of the fans happy, and so I think they're very pleased with that.
And it wasn't just, I've been saying it for literally years. The number one thing that I always felt the most confident was actually maybe more your department, not purposely, not biased, but was the accuracy, the attention to detail. That is what I always had, whether it was talking to you or not, just a lot of confidence that was going to come through. But then you play it and you say, oh man, no, this is actually just a good game. Besides that, I've talked about specifically the combat. I love it. I don't know how you copy it. Like if it's something that's, I think it's like a leader in the industry where it's like, this is very different than other combat systems. I don't know if it's something other teams can copy because I think it really only works with spells and like long distance stuff, but it is honestly incredible. And so far, and even my wife's playing it actually right now behind me, it doesn't get old. Like the combat's just so good. So it's not even just, the Wizarding World part of it. It's everything else. And for the first try, there's been all that debate. And I know you've said on Twitter, the first time the studio's done it, which I mean is true. Everybody comes together. This is their first project together. To do this is honestly incredible.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think I agree with you about the combat, that it turned out really nice, but that was non-trivial, right? That to make combat at range, that fencing at a distance is what I think Alan has called it. That took a lot of effort and rework, and the team that worked on that, I was not part of the combat team, but those guys put many, many hours into trying to get it to feel right and be interesting and have some depth, and I think they did a great job. The combat is probably better than I think anybody was expecting from
easily
from a game where basically you're shooting with wands.
Yeah.
And so just the way that it all fits together is really gratifying, I think, to the team, and they do deserve a lot of credit there. That being said, like with anything else, there are other parts of the game that people are like, well, it didn't live up to expectations here, it didn't live up to expectations there. But I think the places that it did, it like you said, it really hits the notes. The authenticity of trying to get the Wizarding World exactly right, make it feel like you're in Hogwarts, make the castle feel like it's Hogwarts and all these crazy things happening. That was really the core that we were trying to get. It needs to feel like the wizarding world first before any of the rest of this kind
Right.
of layers on top of it.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think for any negative or any shortcoming, you can not necessarily give an excuse, but you can come up with like a positive spin of either saying, well, this thing besides that is actually really good, or just simply saying it's still solid. I think the things that even didn't live up, to expectations are still in that whatever you want, a number out of 10. I hate review scores like giving numbers, but if it's a
Right.
5 or 6 out of 10, it's still that. It could have been a 2. It could have been off, you know what I mean? So even the weaker aspects of the game is a really solid foundation, and even everything else like the accuracy and the details in the combat. Those are things, and Sebastian as a character, not to get into spoilers, but some of the excellence of the writing and the narrative, that's your bar now. And you keep that and you keep working from it for the next one. So I have a ton of confidence that if this is the first project, the second one, I mean, my God. So talking specifically about you, if we want to kind of deep dive, well, a couple things. If you guys want to ask questions, we'll read the chat. Super chats will be like first up, but we will try to read just general questions as well. But just a question I have for you, Troy, or just for people generally, is I'm assuming you're going to get these questions. However much you can say, what did you work on? So people say, oh, did you do this? Did you do that? Just so people know what you did and didn't do.
Right. Yeah. So when I first started on the project, I was in as a designer on lead design, and we were dealing specifically with the NPCs. And I think this is probably important for everybody to understand. Whenever you're starting a new property, especially like we were doing here with Hogwarts, is that you were exploring a lot of different ideas. And so when I was early on in that design role, we were exploring things you could do with NPCs. And people have, come out now saying, "Oh, I wish the game had more of a persona feel or more of a class feel or that sort of thing." Well, that was some of the stuff we were exploring very early on. And I don't really want to get into details because we shelved a lot of that stuff as we developed the game, but some of that stuff could come back later, right? The
Right.
exploration stuff. So I don't want to give anything away. But at the same time, that's where I started, right? We were working with the NPCs and the school and trying to make the school feel like it was really alive. And then there was a change after I'd been there about a year. We actually had a member of the NPC team die. He's in the credits.
Yeah.
Dave Ross. Yeah.
Yep.
So a huge loss to the team because he was around Avalanche for a very long time. He was a member of that team. And so when he passed, we shuffled stuff around that team and then also around the studio. And at that time, John Blackburn, who's the head of the studio, asked me to take a promotion and go back to doing more of a management role. And so then I started to work not only the NPC stuff in a management role, but also on the castle and its contents and trying to make the castle feel like it was authentic and it had lots of stuff to do. So, all those little puzzles and the wow moments of things run around and the portraits. And so that was all the area of the game that I was involved with, but I was in a management role. And I think that's important to point out because I didn't make any assets. I didn't do any art. I didn't do any programming. When you're in a management role on a game like this, it's more like intelligence in the military. You're gathering all the data from what's going on, trying to put it together, synthesize it, and then come up with the right direction so that you're putting your resources, you're putting your guns on the right targets, right?
Right.
That's really what you're doing in a management role when you're working on a big project like that. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question. Castle and its contents and the NPC and their behaviors. And it's not just the NPCs that you see run around the school, but there are different levels of NPCs. You've got some that are background, Ravenclaw student, and then you've got some that are named, like Cressida Bloom or whatever, that have more abilities that they can do. And then you've got some that are actually, companions or quest givers. So all of those have behaviors that are at different levels. And that was all being done by the same team that was trying to handle those behaviors. So.
Well, and and I've said it before in like the review videos that I've done on it, the livability, like the world being alive. One of the things I find so cool and honestly like different about Hogwarts is for any shortcomings you could say about the NPCs, and I do think there's some, the castle, and this is why I wanted to, ask you, the castle itself is literally a character. And that's such a cliche thing because you can, different games, the world is a character, but Hogwarts, it literally has characters on the wall because of portraits and they'll talk. And there's also, you had mentioned not just even characters, but that kind of stuff. statues moving, statues doing those knights that are going around online where the
Right.
one will literally destroy the other. For any shortcomings that the human beings have, it's honestly made up because the castle is more of a character than just the cliche, you know what I mean? The cliche way of saying it really is a character because there's just all these random things that'll move and talk to you, and the staircase, like it really is always alive in a different way than you could say for other games. So is that, when thinking that through, was there like equal thought on the walls and the portraits versus the students? Like, did you kind of like measure which one was more important?
Yeah, this is a super good question, and it speaks not only to the castle but to the entire game.
Yes.
That really have this whole issue of trade-offs, right? Where are you going to put your emphasis? What are you going to build? What are you going to work on, so that the players get that full experience that they want, or that they expect? And so we really felt with the castle that was extremely important. People were coming to Hogwarts to
Yeah.
see Hogwarts. They wanted to feel like the castle was authentic. So there's a lot of extra effort going into making the castle look right. The team that I was working with, Boston Madsen and her team, they were studying architecture. They were, they were deep in the books. They really wanted to get that right because that was so important. But there's a trade-off there, right? So if you're putting all this emphasis into building the castle really great, well, then you don't have the resources maybe to work on other aspects of the game.
Right.
And this carries across everything. For example, Quidditch isn't in the game, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's always like, why isn't Quidditch in the game? And I want to say, we wanted to have Quidditch in the game. I'm wearing a Quidditch shirt. Quidditch is such a huge part of the Wizarding World universe, but you have to weigh it in terms of costs and benefits. How much would it have taken to make a really involved Quidditch game that you would have to take from somewhere else? Like maybe you'd have to give up the room of requirement. And I'm not saying this happened, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
there would have to be a trade-off somewhere.
Right.
And so the whole team ends up in this balancing act of trying to figure out where they're going to put their resources, what is most important to the players, what do they expect is going to happen. And that's why I think Hogwarts as a castle is so rich, is because we felt that is where players are going to spend a lot of time. That is, where the first impression of the game, it really has to be right. And so there's a lot of effort there. And so I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, you can feel it. And a lot of the early game, and depending, I guess, on how fast or slow you go, a lot of the early game is in it. And it almost becomes a point, like you said, the different activities. They're clever, and I said it before, I think there's too many, not inside Hogwarts necessarily, Merlin trials, things like that. There's way too many in some aspects, but they have an unfair, I've taglined it. It has an unfair advantage because it's the Wizarding World. So like using Lumos, the sound, the visual, it's kind of unfair because it's just so cool. And so you want to do the portraits, with the butterflies. It's still a tedious thing. There's still a lot of them, but it has that unfair advantage. Collecting field guide pages shouldn't feel that fun, but it is. Any of that stuff. I actually like the rooms where each face has like a value to it, a number value. It took me a while to actually get it, but I really enjoy it. So again, maybe too many of them throughout the entire game, but it's because we've never done it before. Maybe like that would be a question for me for like sequels and stuff. Not that or anything, but like I wonder what you do going forward, because you can't have 400 field guide pages, even though they are fun. But it just has, I don't know. I will just keep saying it. It's so much fun to just use Revelio. It's so much fun to just use Accio to get it, or even the random little statues that you'll light on fire, the reveal page. It's kind of unfair because it really shouldn't be that enjoyable, especially when it's that repetitive, but it is. I actually don't know why either.
Yeah, so I've seen several reviews of the game. I think yours is among them, but others, like Chris Rega and Sophia Narwitz, Eric Kane, all these voices that I very much respect that have said, from an open world standpoint, Hogwarts Legacy doesn't do that much that is new, right? There's a lot of it that we've seen in Assassin's Creed or in The Witcher or in Skyrim, and I think that's a fair criticism, right? They're like that a lot of what Hogwarts is kind of a mass market approach to an open world game. A lot of the systems are a little bit simplified over what you've seen in other things, but that's also because we understood in trying to get as many people to play as possible, this might be the first open world game they've experienced. And so there's a deliberate kind of, let's make things as simple and as understandable as we can. and then really. So when somebody says, I've reviewed the game, and from an open world standpoint, it's only, a 7.5 or something. And I'll say, yeah, I can totally see that. If you didn't have the richness of the Hogwarts Wizarding World overlaid on top, it is probably just, a 7.5 in terms of feature set. But then you add all that in, and you get another point and a half, and you get up in your 8.5, 9 range, because you can tell that the team wanted to make the game for the fans, and they wanted to make sure it felt right. And that's your extra, like, kind of richness. That's the unique selling feature of Hogwarts, is that it feels like the Wizarding World.
Yeah.
And not because we did something really new in the open world,
right.
Like
Although, like I said, the combat, I would say,
the combat is
the
super.
combat is, and even some of the, like, I actually think it's very clever to use Lumos to look at. I'm sure I can't think of a game off the top of my head, but I'm sure looking at something, trying to find where it is in the world. But again, just, I'm playing on PlayStation. I guess not every system has the advantage. The noises that come out of the DualSense, like hearing Lumos, literally hearing it, and then thinking of Harry Potter, it's like, it's so. I'll just walk around the whole game with it on. I don't really care. It really is an unfair advantage that this game has. That, like you said, it's almost like a gloss. It's an open world, and then you have the gloss of Hogwarts and the Wizarding World that honestly adds so much, to it. We're seeing a lot of things for sequels, so maybe we can kind of get out of the way. Whatever you want to say in terms of sales for this one or a second one. I mean, I've always said I feel very confident. This game is easily, at this point, and we had talked about it before. What do you think about, like, we were kind of right, not to like pat ourselves on the back. The game did what we thought. In fact, it's done better than what we thought. That the mass marketing thing, bag on the game for being generic in some situations. It's going to be one of the best selling games outside of Rockstar and and Call of Duty. So I think it worked.
Yeah, it feels to me like that was the right direction, was to make it really accessible, right? Like, get as many people in that funnel as you can to start playing Hogwarts and then discover what they like about it. So I think it was very successful from that standpoint. As far as sequels go, as far as, what comes next, again, I don't work with the team anymore. I don't know what they're working on, but clearly the game was very successful. There are a lot of people who would love to see sequels and stuff added on. The thing is I believe that the Avalanche team also wants to do more with the property too, right? We left so much on the table, right? That there's a lot that's in the game, but there's a lot that's not in the game that could be done, right? And it's such a rich world. You can just explore new stories and new places and all this. So my guess, without knowing for sure, is that they're probably right now figuring out, okay, what do we do next? How do we, tie this in? They might already have a DLC plan in place, and I don't know about it because I've been out of the studio for 2 years. But looking at the state of the game and what came out, what I know they had when I left, there were even some cuts that I've seen, that 2 years ago that they've pulled back on.
Well, some people have thought even like the currency. They changed the currency, stuff like that.
They simplified. A lot of places you can see where they like, let's bring this back a little bit. Let's make it a little easier. But that just means they could, in a sequel, enrich things, right? They could come and put some of that stuff back in. I think.
What would you do? Would you do DLC, or would you skip? What kind of gamer guy? What are you? Do you prefer them to do? I've always looked at it as more content that's good. Even if you split the team into like a 25-75, you're still slowing, in my opinion, you'd still be slowing down a sequel. I would honestly prefer a sequel over, but that's just my opinion. But where are you on just maybe any game's DLC kind of thing?
Well, that is a really good question. It kind of depends. So this may be interesting for some people to know, but within the studio, we have a lot of open world fans, right? We play different types of games, different open world games. So my game that I liked a lot was Witcher 3, right? I was a Witcher 3 guy, and I like Witcher 3 with its expansions, the Blood and Wine expansion. These are great. And so when Hogwarts Legacy ended up having some similarities to Witcher 3, and you can see it, I'm very happy about that, because that was the direction I felt was right for the property, very story-driven, character-driven sort of thing, as opposed to something that might be more simulation, although you could go more that direction too. So as far as like sequels, they could go almost any direction. They could do a DLC where they expand some things that's in the existing game, and I would be surprised if they don't, like if they don't kick something out in 6 months or a year. But my guess is they would probably put most folks on working on a full-on sequel that takes into account all the stuff that people want now, which is actually a really good thing for all of those of you who are in the YouTube community about Hogwarts Legacy. Here's this great opportunity. Now that you've played the first one, you can go and start making lists of like, what would you like to see in the second, or what sort of improvements, or and the thing is, I think that the Avalanche team will review those videos and probably take them to heart, right? So if you got a bunch of videos where people are asking for things, I'm pretty sure the design team at Avalanche will go, "Ooh, those are some good ideas. Let's put that in."
No, I'm sure the lists. I have lists in my head or written down. I'm sure the lists will come. You mentioned simulation a few times, and there was a question earlier. I don't know how much you're able to say, but something along the lines of this kind of question. What made you go not the sim route?
Yeah, that is a good question. So the real issue is that having a story-based game where you are the center of the story, you need to have strong characters and cool plot events and all these sort of things. That pulls against a simulation where anything can happen and everybody's Hogwarts is going to be different. So we ended up, as part of our development, recognizing this, that there's some in the studio, some who feel like we really need to have a rich story, and others who are like, oh, we need to have more of a simulation. How can we blend these things? Where can we find a happy medium? And really, the decision not to be as simulated isn't because it's a bad idea. It's because it didn't integrate very well with the story aspects that were driving everything forward. So it's not a bad idea. Right. It's just we only have so much time, only so much resources. We have to pick a direction, and the direction was to go more story-like, more Witcher 3-like, and less Skyrim. Right? It's more focused in one than in
I think you can, if you know what you're looking for, I think you can kind of identify. I said that, I don't know if the video's out and we won't talk about it, but the ending. And I was thinking about, the choices and stuff. And I kind of came, honestly, in that video that maybe isn't out yet, same conclusion, where it's like, you can ask for these things and there's nothing wrong with, say, branching paths, right? Having way more of it, because there's not, but you can have more. But that really goes against what the whole game is. So looking at it from the ending, right, as us as consumers, you have to think, well, the entire game would have to be different. Now, you guys working on it, you have to make a decision early on, right at the beginning, which of the two paths. So I honestly think if you're looking for it, you can kind of figure it out, that if you want certain things, you got to be able to realize that the whole game kind of has to shift in order to make those things work. And like, it's not saying one is better than the other. There, I think, could be equal people that want simulation versus, but it would be a completely different game. So,
yeah, I think that analysis is spot on. Yeah, the trade-offs. Whatever you go, if you go one direction, you're going to have to pull from something else, and so you have to make difficult decisions about. And it feels to me like the team made mostly the right decisions, because you can see it in the way people are responding. They're like, oh, I love the story. I love the way it feels. I love, that they like what they've got. Now they're just like, I want more. I want more of that, and I want you to do these other things too.
Right. It's a good. I think we maybe even said that one of the other 2 times you were on. It's a good problem to have when people accept what you're given and they just want more. Like, that's a good. It's not a rejection of what's there. It's adding on to it. That's probably the best case scenario. Dylan asks, Troy, was one aspect of the game that exceeded your expectations? So that's a good one.
That is a good one. Believe it or not, I actually think the castle exceeded my expectations in its authenticity and how detailed it is. Right, man, that castle is crazy. So I've been playing it, and I'll go into rooms that were still, being worked on, and I'll just stand there for a while and watch, the lighting change in the room, or watch the NPCs come through and they're doing stuff. And little things will happen, the little wow moments. Peeves might show up, or this sort of thing. And to me, I'm like, oh, that is so great that we got all this together, that richness. That was one of the things that really impressed me. The combat. So I was one of those guys, and I'm going to admit that early on in development, I was like, man, I don't know if we can get this action-based combat that we want to do, because it's tricky to get that spinning and dodging and hitting things, different spells. And so there was a part where I was like, man, I don't know if this is the right direction for combat or not, or if we should do something that was more RPG and stat-based and less so twitchy-based. Yeah. And so I was pleasantly surprised, when I'm playing the game now as it's come out, to say, wow, this combat really is fun. it's
Yeah.
fun to play like this. So there's something else that I exceeded my expectations.
Yeah. No, it works. It's I've said it. I have like a podcast on my second channel, and we've talked about just as a joke, like a WB thing. I wonder when they give out these contracts to the studios if a requirement is gameplay, because you look at like the Arkham franchise or Monolith with the Middle Earth games, which is also kind of that. It just seems like Gotham Knights maybe being the weaker one, but still, honestly, it's solid. It just seems like any WB game has to, like, to put their seal on it, you have to deliver good combat. And it always happens. Like Warner Bros, say what you want about them, or Warner Bros in general, they know how to nail combat, honestly, maybe better than anyone.
There are probably some executives at WB who love to hear that right now, because I know that that's a push for some of them. Like, make sure the combat's good. Yeah.
Yeah. The combat was surprisingly good. I feared it'd be slow. Judging. Yep. Yeah. Then that was something we talked about in the state of play. I actually had, for as many back and forths I've had with the game, I've always praised its combat, even with that state of play, the rigidness, kind of the character, they're slow moving. But I think it is a game you need to play it, because even myself, I was very critical of enemies standing around. When you watch it, it doesn't give off the greatest vibe, because enemies do just stand around. But when you're playing it, they attack like often enough, and there's diversity in the enemy types. And you're switching spell, even if nobody's attacking, you're panicking. You're trying to figure out what spell works for which. It just works really, the whole thing. Swapping, enemies having certain protections that you have to use certain spells, the diversity of enemies and what spells they use on you. It actually is something you need to play. Watching it, I don't think does it justice.
Yeah, I'll see some reviews that'll say, they don't think there's enough diversity in the enemy types, or the, spells are just kind of casting again and again. I'm like, have you really played the game that much? Because once you get out there and you start discovering, different enemy types have different susceptibilities.
Yeah.
Some of them are good at one thing, some are good at other. And then you start discovering these combos you can do with your spells, Glacius plus Defendo or whatever. And you start discovering these things, and you're like, ooh, and then I'm gonna Leviosa the Dugbog, and you just start finding that cool, like, it makes you feel like you've got a skill set that makes you a cooler wizard than just button mashing or something.
For sure. What's your favorite character? That's a good one.
So I really like Sebastian.
Yeah.
And I think everybody loves Sebastian. Sebastian is probably the favorite character that I've seen. So earlier, I made this thing about Grippy Whifferton was the name of this goofy character that we used as an NPC. And I thought that there was going to be some sort of reference. I asked one of the guys this past weekend, hey, did we get any, Grippy in there? And he's like, no, they wouldn't let us put anything like that in. But there is the character Cressida Bloom, the first name Cressida. My online name is Troilus. I've been doing that. So it's Troilus and Cressida from, the Shakespeare play.
Yeah.
So there's a character that slipped in
nice.
that I named, they're a little fingerprint. Cressida is related to Troilus.
I'd like to nominate Black.
Story.
I'd like to nominate Headmaster Black. I don't.
Did you like Headmaster Black a lot? Because he's not in the game that tremendously. But.
Right. Well, so I won't spoil the ending, but in terms,
don't spoil anything. Because there's some cool stuff.
I won't spoil any. But in terms of his character trait, he does, in the time he's given, and Simon Pegg, he does way more than I thought. He is number one, the attention to detail in him just alone is another proof. If you know some of the, and I've talked about it before, right? I'm not the biggest lore guy, but I know quite a bit about how students, have perceived Black. I think everybody maybe has a little bit, and you can see it immediately that's exactly the kind of, this is a guy who doesn't really want to be there. He took the job. You hear him say that, all this stuff. And then without saying the ending, I think there's like more to him that's actually extremely, maybe we can talk about it after. It's extremely cool. The kind of, he doesn't really have an arc, but there's more than one side to him. And he really did actually, because going in, and I think in the live stream I did 2 weeks ago with the creators, I nominated Black as maybe he was going to be the worst, because I thought he would just be so not used at all that it would kind of be like a cheap little, we got Simon Pegg thing. But no, I mean, in a sense, he is only in it a couple scenes, so maybe budget constraints and stuff like that. But what he does in the time he's there, and what you do with his character, let's say, is extremely good.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear you say that. I think the story team did a really fantastic job under very difficult conditions, right?
Yeah.
Where they were trying to write new characters into this existing world and make them feel right, like they dovetail into what's going on.
Yeah.
Plus all the all the other stuff that's going on around the game.
Yeah.
So I think story team gets a lot of credit for making it feel right, making these characters uh, fit within the Wizarding world and not feel like they're outside of it.
Yeah.
I really like. They did a great job. Good job to the
I
story
was
team.
amazed, again, without spoiling it, I was amazed at who was hidden and how much was hidden with certain, with actually a huge cast of characters that you go all in. They went all in on those professors. And arguably looking back, it's like, man, those professors are not in the game, not really worthy of a lot of the Twitter stuff. There's actually other characters, but you get why, because those characters are, pretty big fundamentals to the story, and they're excellent. They're excellent characters. So yeah, even the little bit of the deceptiveness that they did, with the marketing was really cool. Let's see. Okay, I think we can dance around without spoilers. Which of the trials by number was your favorite?
Probably third.
Same. They're good. They're very good. Okay, again, dancing around it. Was there ever a plan to have, maybe we can consider this like a literal Battle of Hogwarts in the game?
Yeah, that's hard to answer, right? Because
Yeah.
when you're exploring a lot of different ideas, I'm almost certain there was a time when that idea was on the table, right? And then you end up getting into what's it going to be involved? How much time do we have? How many resources? What are the other quests that we have to do? So my guess is that there was a time when there was a more involved Battle of Hogwarts. But again, I wasn't on the story team. I was
Right.
over there working in Hogwarts. So I would hear things about the story. This is actually kind of fun about working on a game of this size, is that you'll be working on your part of the game and not even know what's going on in the rest of the game.
Yeah.
So then you'll go and you'll play part of the game that you haven't experienced, and it's all new, right? You like, wow, this is like a whole new game. I've been working on this. For me, the Overland is like that. As soon as I get outside of Hogwarts, outside of Hogsmeade,
Yeah.
all of that, all those hamlets, all that stuff out there, all the swamps and the forest, Forbidden Forest,
Yeah.
new to me. I have hardly played that at all. So I'm like going, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did a good job even with that. Here's some positivity thrown towards your way. Such a nice soul, wishing him the best, him and his close ones.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did have quite that issue when I left, but things with the family are very much improved. I feel like things are much more stable. It was the right choice at the right time. So yeah, I think thank you. Thank you for those
Yeah,
compliments.
well, yeah, I said it before in case you didn't know, but I think you've seen a lot of the fans' reception towards you, even specifically. Not to make it all about you. I mean, you are loved, honestly, and the team is. We've said it before. It's why, pushing aside the controversy, it's why I've always felt so passionate and kind of defending it. A lot of good people, it seems, on the team. You, the stuff that was done to people like you, not so good. The fans are like legitimately all in it together. We're kind of all one. Like, it's the thing that a lot of people miss out on when they just label.
Yeah, I think that's something that I hope Hogwarts Legacy does for the industry, just in general, is this recognition that fans and players and developers, we're all kind of on the same team, right? We're all trying to cooperate to have this really great game experience, whatever game it is.
Yeah.
And I think that the Hogwarts Legacy marketing and PR outreach to the fans was really smart, because it looked like the press over there had an axe to grind. They wanted to make the game all about the controversy, and we're over there going, well, could you just please pay attention to the game we're making? Could you look at what we're doing? And so by doing that, by going straight to the fans, that's all the fans really cared about. We just wanted to know about Hogwarts. We just wanted to know about the characters. We wanted to know about the spells. The stuff that we cared about, the fans also cared about. And that connection, I think, really helped to drive the hype, because then you got fans and you got developers kind of on the same page, and the press seems like they're off to the side, kind of taking shots at what the fans and the developers are enjoying.
That's all people ever really want with a game, isn't it? Is to know about I think, and maybe that's what stops, honestly, some of it is sometimes the game isn't all that good, or there's also games that, because I've said it before, even from like a content point of view, content creator, not every game is Hogwarts literally is special, right? Because of the IP, because of all it's come before. You can't do 400 theory videos on atomic heart. You can't. So Hogwarts does, you know what I mean? It does have that advantage, but that this cutting out of the middleman thing, not, you know, we'll probably end it after this in terms of the controversy stuff. I just wish we could do that, because a lot of people ultimately do just want to know about the game, whether it's, you know, a game maybe that's so like not so surface level or surface level that you can't go too deep in. It's still the same thing. People still just want to know about the game. What do you think? Do you think this will be a wake up? It was a wake up call. Do you think they'll stay awake going forward, or do you think it's going to take more than just this game?
I think that there was a pretty significant change, or that maybe the gaming press is still reacting to it. For example, if you look at IGN and IGN's review, right? I thought they did a pretty good job because, you know, the guy who reviewed it said, okay, I'm going to have to put the reviewing of the game first, and then let's review it on the merits, and then we'll talk about the controversy separately. And I'm like, good, that's how I think journalism should be done, right? Let's focus on the merits. On the other hand, we do know that there are some press outlets who said it's all about the controversy. Right. Who cares about the game? We're not even going to really play the game, but we'll write a review anyway.
Right.
You know? And I think that actually put those people who are writing those articles outside of kind of the game industry, right? It pushes fans see it, developers see it. Everybody goes, "Why are you doing this? You're not even talking about the game anymore. You're talking about your personal opinions as though it was relevant." And I think going forward into future games, you're going to see a lot more of developers reaching directly to their fans and not letting, you know, the press interpret the game as much as they have in the past. Right. And I think Hogwarts Legacy is a real good litmus test for that. You know, don't let the press tell everybody what to think about the game. Let the fans interact with the game and let them kind of set the tone. Yeah. And to me, I think there will be a change. I think we'll see.
Glad.
You know,
I know. I mean, honestly, I hope for it. And again, Hogwarts Legacy is special. It's special to me as a person for how long I've covered it and all that jazz. But then, and not even just from the game, but like this movement. And again, those are kind of cliche, like, you know, cringe like things to say that the like a movement of a game. But I mean, I do believe this game has changed some things in people. I don't think there's ever been this kind of distrust before in game journalists. You know, spotlights on who's good and who's bad. Not. It always comes across, oh, you have to say nice things about it. Not really. You don't have to give it a good score. You just have to, like you said, separate. And it shows the spotlight, or it shines the spotlight on who did it. And also the game then sells what, probably 20 million in the first, let's say, 6 months. That's a huge. It's not some indie game that sold 200,000 and it was a success. This is a huge AAA thing. So it should be a leader in the industry. Maybe not for, you know, individual elements of the game, but how you treat a game is how it's a leader.
Yeah, I think that when press outlets, if they're doing responsible journalism, you know, they need to treat it as objectively as possible, because that's what fans expect. You know, that's why they come to the press, is tell me what the facts are about the game. And when they don't make it about the facts anymore, they make it about personal opinion. Well, then people don't want to listen to a personal opinion, right? So, but you know, sometimes like IGN does need to get credit that they recognized. Well,
I was shocked.
Let's get back to doing our job.
I said that in when I did like a review roundup. IGN deserves some praise, honestly, for as much as I bag on them, because they actually did it. And I'll be honest, I didn't think they would, but they did. Just got to the mission where you got some watery eyes. LOL. Oh man, what a mission. I assume you mean the ending, because that's when I said that I got emotional in it. Combat's amazing. Blaming the lack of Quidditch on Black. Yeah. So did you know that was going to happen? That Black will give the speech saying the injury?
Yes. Before I left, I knew that they were going to have to address the lack of Quidditch in the game, and that it was going to happen through something that Black said. Yeah. So I did know that when I left.
I love it.
Yeah.
I honestly love it.
It's a good way to tie Quidditch in. Yeah.
It's what people predicted, where I think did Last Marauder, I think he even said, somebody on my stream 2 weeks ago literally said one of the reasons, in a good way, why they're going to hate Black is they want him to be the reason you can't do things. Like he's a limitation on the game. That's exactly what they did with Black. And it's just that kind of cheek, like awareness. You know, we don't have it. Here's the in-game reason. You may know the out-game reason, but here's why in the lore. That's a real, and to do it immediately, right? That's a pretty cool thing. Um, this I'm going to assume is more of what you said about just choosing one thing in terms of time and resources. Why do you think Sebastian more than Poppy and Natsai?
Yeah, and the answer is pretty simple. It's just a time and resources primarily. Yeah, the it takes a lot of time to develop a mission with multiple levels and all the
Yeah.
characters and all that. So you're trying to do everything to the highest level of ability that you can, but you still have to say, well, we only have so many popsicle sticks to go around, so put 10 over here and 4 over here and 6 over there, and that's it. And then we're out of popsicle sticks.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I still think they did. It's the same thing I said. Take the negative and make it a little positive. I think what's there. I think Poppy is maybe like the cool. Like I enjoy talking to Poppy maybe more than either of the others. I think without spoiling it, I think Natsai's secret, like her backstory, is actually extremely cool. She's just not. She's easily like third if you want to rank them in terms of time on screen. She's third, but she's actually pretty cool. Sebastian's just all around, and I've said it before, it's not just Sebastian. There's actually a comment. Ominous. What a great character. Solomon. Honestly, pretty cool for a little one-dimensional S kind of guy. Really cool. His entire family and the characters linked to him, it's not just Sebastian. It's actually, like you said, this line of quests. It's everybody, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so Sebastian is my favorite quest line, and I know that the folks who worked on those quest lines are very happy to see so many people going, "Yes, Sebastian is the favorite," and they're like, "Told you."
Was it? Oh man, I don't know what you'd be allowed to say. Was it like a conscious decision for like how deep does it get? The Slither, like him being a Slytherin, did that matter? No Ravenclaw, did that matter? Did it turn out that way where Ravenclaw what? Because you could have swapped Poppy, just put someone in a different house. Whatever you're allowed to say.
Yeah. Well, I guess the best way to talk about, the development of Hogwarts Legacy, really any major video game, is that it's very organic, right? There's a lot of reacting to what's working and what's not working, and where you have resources and stuff. So you don't start out with we're going to make Sebastian the best or the most involved. You
Right.
don't start there. Instead, you're like, we're going to try and make everything super awesome and every quest super great. And
Right.
then you just have to start making decisions about what falls where. So the reason that Sebastian is the best may not be purely because it was, where the best stuff happened. It's also because some of these other things lost some of their elements along the way, or they had to be adjusted. And it's funny because different people will have different things that they react to. Some people will say Sebastian is my favorite, but I've seen some people say, "Oh no, I like Poppy, and I like the vivariums, and I like the Room of Requirement. And that part of the game is my favorite." Right. So different people respond to different things too. So it's kind of tricky. To cover all the bases at once.
No, that's a good, and because they each have. And the thing that gives Sebastian, again, like the unfair advantage that I've talked about is his link to the main quest is so evident that I thought, without spoiling it, I literally thought they were almost the exact same thing until they kind of weren't. With the other two are as well, like Harlow with Natsai, but you never see him. You just hear, he's the third in command. And then obviously, the quests continue, let's say. So they, and Poppy with, Beasts and stuff, you have a link. It's just Sebastian. And, again, like you said, it's good to hear that kind of stuff because it's like, it's just how it went in game development. When you're playing it, it's just so clear. Sebastian is the driving force, even of the main story, let's say, and the other two just aren't.
Yeah, if there's anything that I would want players to understand about development is that we want to give you everything we can, but there's a cost associated with everything. And so there's always those trade-offs. And so, a lot of times I'll see reviews, and this has kind of changed, I think, over the last 20 or 30 years, where people will start out with in their mind what they think their perfect game would be, right? I think the game would be perfect if it had these features, and then they get the game and it's missing a few of those. So they take points off for the features that they think the game should have had. And that's kind of tricky because really, I feel like you should be reviewing a game on what it does do and not on what you think it should have done. and so, you get into these kind of difficult situations.
That's fair. That's a fair mentality. I think just because of social media, because of comparisons, right? I think it's probably is just see a game. At least for me, maybe it's just the way I create, because I talk about all these other games besides Hogwarts. I am always talking about comparisons in the industry or trends. So I assume when you see, but it's fair what you're saying too. Well, judge every game on the game. Firstly, right? Just on the game. I think just because there's so many more games now than there were. There's like a website that keeps track of every game that's ever released that I actually really like for just nerdy kind of stuff, and it's the last 12 years has been like quadruple. Every year just gets more and more games. So you have more comparisons of what you could do better, what could be worse, right? I think that's a big part of it. So we got the ominous quote, ominous being their favorite, which he's so good. Any chance we get a sequel? We talked about that earlier, Taylor, in terms of just rewind it a little bit. We talked about DLC and a sequel. Can you share any behind the scenes stuff about design choices for the trials? There's some mechanics there that are pretty unique, even for the Wizarding world.
Yeah, I don't feel very qualified to talk about that.
Yeah,
actually. I wasn't involved in that.
Four trials? Maybe can you talk about the activities you do in Hogwarts? If we can spin the question, because I think he's talking about those 4 main story trials. But what about like the Butterfly, Lumos, or Field Guide page? How does that happen? How does the Field Guide and that many of them, like, how does that even come up?
Well, how did that get going?
Because like, who comes
Hogwarts
up with something like that?
Yeah, it's you've probably noticed, and I think this is part of being a more mass market open world game, is that you don't gain experience from running around just killing things, right? You have to complete quests, you have to do things that are challenges, and that I think is actually really good for this type of game because it doesn't turn as much into grindy killing things to level up. It's more about completing those different things. So getting back, I guess, to the field guide then, and what made that kind of unique is that allowed, from a design standpoint, to kind of consolidate all the different things you could do into one place, one happy thing, and everything you do, whether it's collecting stuff or fighting enemies or getting a new spell, all improves your character's level, and it kind of all fits in neatly through the wizarding field guide. Now, if you got rid of that, you can see how the game would suddenly be really spread out. Like if you were trying to do more of a simulation and you didn't have these key checkpoints that you're trying to do, it would make the game feel very different, right?
It goes back to, if you want simulation, I get it. And I still think even with some of the classes, like the literal classes you go to, I think there's room for more sim-like things with it, a little bit more Persona-esque. Like you can definitely do it and still have the same game. But if you want to go all the way to, you're going to have to sacrifice quite a bit of this, the game we just got. And also, I imagine from well, you can correct me if I'm wrong, being, a developer, you don't just switch. You wouldn't, for a second game, theoretically, let's say, you're not going to get the polar opposite of this game. I assume that's way too many new assets. You don't have the time to do something like that.
Yeah, if they were to do a sequel, like in the Hogwarts Legacy 2, they would build off of all the things that players are already familiar with and then add to them and improve them. Yeah. But, they could easily do, a Hogwarts school simulation, give it a different label or something, and make it an entirely different game where maybe you're not out in the overland, doing all these things. Instead, it's just the school and you start as a first year or something. And, you could see how that there's an opportunity to go in a different direction with a new product that maybe builds on some of the things here, but is not really a sequel. It's more of like a spin-off or something.
Yeah. Which we'll keep reading it, but let me ask you that, because that's been something I've been and you coming at it from a different perspective, I've been so hard on. This should be, not, we've talked about the sales, we talked about the reception. This should be the catalyst for more Wizarding World games beyond just Avalanche. So, but to hear your thoughts kind of on it in a different way, I've always talked about one tough thing, right, is can you ever find a studio that has this kind of fan, this kind of, back and forth? Is there another Chandler out there? Is there another team? I think you probably could find one. What do you think, just like yourself, your own opinion, what do you think is the future for literally like port key games, Wizarding World games? Do you think the option of a Quidditch multiplayer only, say, game, do you think Hogwarts should maybe be the only Wizarding game, or more than just that?
Well, I think there should be multiple Wizarding games to serve the fans. I mean, clearly they've got a fan base. Let's say it sells 20 million units over the course of its life cycle. That's a lot of people who are still very interested in this.
Yeah, more than
So
most games.
yeah, I think having a spinoff like Quidditch is one of those things that I really, really, really wanted to get in the game, right? Because it's such an iconic part of the Wizarding world. It's one of the top 5 things you think about.
Yeah,
But at the same time, if you take a step back and you look at Quidditch from a game development standpoint and what's involved, you realize that Quidditch, as designed, as written by Ms. Rowling, is a pretty poor game, right? It's not designed well at all because it's all built around the Seeker.
yeah,
Ends the game that's worth like 150 points in the standard thing, whereas a regular goal is only worth 10, so it's
right.
like 15 times. And so if you're playing the game literally
Yeah, well,
with
that's
those rule
hilarious.
sets, nobody's going to care about being a beater or a chaser or a keeper or
Yeah,
anything like this because it's all about the Seeker. But if you want to make a good Quidditch game, you're going to want to fulfill the fan fantasies for all those positions. Alex,
right.
you may want to be the best keeper for Gryffindor that they've ever had, and so you're going to need to make sure the Gryffindor or the keeper role on the Quidditch pitch feels authentic and feels like you're making a difference in the game,
Yeah,
even if the rules wouldn't make it appear as
right.
such. So you're gonna. I don't know how.
Do you think a
You know,
modern day Quidditch World Cup, not even just a remake, if you literally built from the ground up a separate team, not Avalanche, just made a Quidditch game, do you think that even I get scared of microtransact like the business side. Do you think functionally it would even be a thing that would work?
I think it would, but I think that the players are going to have to allow a little bit of latitude for
Yeah.
the game design team to kind of bend the rules to make it feel right, even if the
Yeah.
rules don't match it. So like whenever you've seen a film, I like to talk about Quidditch, obviously.
Yeah.
Whenever you've seen a film of Quidditch, it's always the exciting moments. Somebody slamming into something that
Right.
the beaters are hitting the bludgers at the people. So you see all these really cool, exciting moments. But the game itself, if you extract it from those cool moments, the game itself is not very interesting as designed, right? It's
Yeah.
basically people waiting around until the snitch gets found and then the game ends.
Yeah.
And the game ends instantly according to the rules. And that's not going to be fun unless you're playing as a seeker,
Right.
if you're playing as something else. So my thought is in order to get a good Quidditch game, all the positions on the field are going to need to feel valuable. The rules of Quidditch may have to be adapted a little bit to make all those positions feel valuable. And I think people are going to want like leveling up trees. And they're going to want to
Right.
improve
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
broom. And they're going to want, to make a really good, rich Quidditch game is going to take a lot of effort. And then people are going to want to play it multiplayer too, right? I mean, you can see
Yeah, I
how
mean,
this
it
would grow
literally
and
would
grow
be
and
an
grow.
EA Sports. It'd be an EA
Yeah.
Sports, which is Quidditch World Cup. But yeah, and maybe that's why, honestly, to take the easy way out, it's probably why it could be easier. Just you put it like I've always thought of Quidditch as a separate thing. I've understood, the will it be in Hogwarts or not. I've always kind of imagined it as its own Quidditch World Cup game. It could be easier, literally, to just try to throw it in Hogwarts Legacy 2, because you could make your character just the Seeker, so you do just focus on the best position. That
Yeah.
could be then you don't have to really worry about, but you'd still have to like the design of the people. One of the complaints of people in Hogwarts is the standing around kind of NPCs. So you want crowds, you want people flying on brooms in complex patterns, but so you'd have to really elevate stuff. So even that alone would be, I imagine, difficult to design.
Yeah, I feel like Quidditch, if it's done to the level that I think fans would like it to be, it's like making a Madden game or
It is.
something,
It's
right?
a
It's it's,
sports
it's
game. Yeah.
really involved with different players and positions and
Yep.
abilities and tech trees. If you went that far, you could do a Quidditch game that's much simpler, but I think that fans want the full Quidditch
Yeah.
experience. They want to be the best beater of 1893
What do
or
the
whatever.
executives at Warner Bros. Want though? What do they?
They want to
Like I
make money.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I do get scared. I do get scared about because then you got lives. If it's again, I imagine it as it's a standalone thing. But if it's a standalone thing, is it multiplayer? So is it free to play? Then is there a battle pass? Is there live? I mean, and we know companies, they could definitely go down the wrong road so quickly. So there's risks, rewards. But speaking of what we'll keep reading, as I keep saying, what do you think about like the idea of something like a Ghost of Tsushima, like the Legends DLC, or do you think Hogwarts could ever be, because I saw a question earlier. There's that mod, right? That mod team, I think, that did Skyrim,
The
right? Or
Skyrim guys, yeah,
yeah,
making
they're
a
doing.
multiplayer mod.
Do
Yeah.
you think that's ever? I think it honestly. I would throw out. I thought about this before we went on. Gotham Knights, as poorly, not greatly received that game was, the wave based mode they just added like a month after, where you go on the floors. I think that kind of works perfectly. I don't want to say it because Gotham Knights wasn't received all that well, but I actually think you make a separate kind of thing for people. You do wave modes, you mix and match enemy types, you give them spells. I actually think that's not even that difficult. I mean, all things considered, it wouldn't be that difficult, and it kind of makes sense.
So you're talking about multiplayer in the
Like,
battle
not, yeah,
arenas,
not,
or
I'd
yeah.
actually avoid multiple people in Hogwarts. Like, that's what the mod is, right? You can. I mean, I get it. I get the want of people to do that, but I actually just think separate mode in the main menu. You, I don't know, a cave system or a castle, and they just load wave 1 through 30. Maybe people feel cheapened by that, but you can mix and match enemies. You can have your friends play. I I think that is the most achievable if you want a quick turnaround. I think that's the easiest.
Yeah, I think that the team at Avalanche and with WB at large, they could kind of make almost anything at this point. Go in any direction. But it's all about what is the best thing to spend on that will please the most fans,
Right.
and that's pretty tricky. That's why I think it's really good for fans to speak up and come out with these videos or these uh, top 10 things that we would like to see in a sequel, or you could rank the existing missions, or you could rank the collectibles, all
Do you
that
have a
sort
do
of.
you have a are you looking at my list of video ideas?
Yeah, hopefully I'm not giving anything away, but those are those sorts of things, when you've got a development studio like Avalanche that wants to please the fans, are really good. That's a dialogue that starts to
Yeah.
happen. You start to have your development team listening very closely to what the players are saying, and then the game gets a lot better
Yeah.
because they're doing what the players want. And I think Hogwarts Legacy is well positioned for that now. That it is your Hogwarts Legacy, right? The people who are playing it, the fans, are what really matter. And so if there's a real fan push for, I think, just about anything, that they will try and find a way to make it happen.
Yeah. This one's really tough, but I just want to kind of float it out there. Did we at least have parents? Did it get cut? Without spoiling things, because I don't think the ending has any like bearing on that question. I think at this point people should have played the first hour of the game. I will say I love it. The opening of this game is literally, if you had a checklist of everything you want to get done or nail in the first hour of a game, it literally does them all. There is some unansweredness, kind of awkwardly, with your character specifically. A lot of theories that we had weren't addressed whatsoever. So whatever you want to say, if that's a deflecting question, you can,
Yeah, I kind of want to deflect and say
yeah, that's
that
fine.
the player character in the game is deliberately ambiguous, right? That there was
Okay.
some, like, we're not going to answer all the questions in this,
Yeah.
in this version. Let's leave some open, unanswered things. Also, give the player some latitude to interpret too. By design, there's like, let's not answer everything so that players can feel like they can bring something to the story. And that might be something interesting if they do a sequel. Like, maybe
Right.
your character creator has more backstory you can do or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just but it
Um,
was really important, and I think this is good for people to hear very early on. Make it for fans. Make it so that everybody feels welcome. Right. That's part of why that character creator has the options in it that it does. Was that we wanted to make sure that anybody who was interested in the wizarding world felt like they could have a 16-year-old representation of themselves in the game.
yeah.
And so they put extra effort into that
Yeah.
because we want everybody to play.
Well, let me ask you this, and I don't know how you how the response will go, but I gotta ask, just because I feel like I've had the back and forth with the YouTube videos, the Chudley Cannons poster and the
Hmm.
year. I mean, deflect away, but considering I've covered it all the way through, I my integrity makes me ask you this. So I made a video a few days after the game came out. I don't know if you saw it. They took out off the date of 1890. That's not there. Chudley Cannons poster, all things considered. There's oh man, I forget the name. Monrose, whatever, Mud Pies or whatever, another Quidditch team. I forget the
The
name of it.
Magpies, I think.
Magpies,
Yeah.
yep. They
Yep.
won their second championship. They've only won 2. It was somewhere in that era. Okay, but then when you do a random, just looking around one of these taverns, you find a letter that's written in February of 1890. So I made a video before I found that letter, and I said that the ambiguous that you just said, my interpretation of your whole back and forth with Twitter with the Chudley Cannons was I think they removed the year. You're not in a year to make it ambiguous. But then that dang letter that was February of 1890, I think it has to be September of 1890 now. So respond however you want, but I wouldn't feel right with myself if I didn't ask you.
No, I think your analysis is very good. I think they did go back and try and make it more ambiguous so that they might have a little more latitude in future products or whatever,
Right.
so that it's not quite so tied down. And the Chudley Cannons thing, that was one of the things that I saw, I speculated on, and then I saw the poster show up again. I'm like, oh, I was totally wrong.
Yeah.
Because if they kept that poster in, what I thought was going on there was not going on, clearly.
Yeah.
And so this is a case of me being outside the studio and just trying to guess at what's going on. So I thought the Chudley Cannons poster was an anachronism. I was like, oh, I think that poster shouldn't be up. And then I look at it a little more closely. It shows up again. I'm like, no, Avalanche has different plans than I think they do.
Yeah.
So I really don't know specifically, but I think you're on the right track that they made somewhere towards the end of development. Let's make the timeline a little bit more ambiguous so that we have some latitude in future products or where we want to go.
And to be honest, I'll drop the letter. Like, I'll jokingly be hard, I suppose, on them when it comes to the next game of time placement. But how many people found the letter? How many, like, do they care if you found because now, well, actually, okay, factually, it would have to be 1890 September or 1891, because then you have the Chudley Cannons thing start to pop up and you have Dumbledore. So it's got to be those 2 years. But yet again, if I didn't find the letter, I'd be willing to give them all of it and say it's honestly probably in the 1880s, and that's ambiguous. They're not going to give a year, so that when they, in my opinion, make 2 and 3, which is year 6 and 7, they'll be okay. They won't run into Dumbledore. I still think, I mean, again, a wild 10-year prediction from now when I'm old. I still think that's going to happen. That's what they put into place. But that letter was so odd, and I was like, dang it, do I literally have to make a second, like an update video? Because why is that letter in this game?
Yeah, it's also possible that letter is a bug, right? That it's possible that they said, let's get rid of all these dates, and then one slipped through or something.
I was thinking that. It could have been that. This one's good. Was Sebastian's storyline supposed to be our storyline? Ooh, hints the Hogwarts Dark Legacy rumor was on Reddit before the reveal.
I'm going to say no. I don't think at any time you were supposed to play as Sebastian. Sebastian as a character was in development, I think, even before we had the full understanding of what the character's storyline was going to be.
Nice.
That's right.
You can see it. You can see that Dark Legacy thing. That was a big thing with other YouTubers, right? The idea of I mean, without spoiling it, you can totally see that kind of like mentality in the team, which I think is really, because if you don't know, it's still fine. And if you do know, you're like, oh, those are really cool. You can kind of tell where the name has kind of like morphed or, shifted and stuff. I like it. Hello, Troy and Alex. Hello. Going to other schools. Oh, man. This would run into, for me, the same problems as the whole, do you reuse assets or do you literally create a whole nother game from the ground up? Maybe you would know more than me. Like, what do you think the odds of a different school in general, maybe not even just from Avalanche, do you think it's possible one day a team out there says, let's do a Wagadoo school?
I think it's possible. I think that it's a little bit unlikely because of, name recognition and how many people play it. So what I think may be more likely is that you'd still have Hogwarts, but you'd get these field trips out to different schools or whatever, and you'd get to see some of a school or some of something. That's just a guess. Again, I'm speculating a lot of this, but I would be surprised if there was like a Wagadoo legacy. I don't think you'd ever see a game that would be just about another school.
Honestly, a Triwizard tournament fits.
That would be cool, huh?
Really well, because then you introduce those schools. That would work really well. Same thing. Somebody said American school as well. I love the game and play every day before and after work. I can't get enough of it. What's your opinion on? So like me, I feel bad because like when I made the review, I clocked myself. And in the game, I love games that tell you how many hours. Games that don't, I feel like deserve a point removed in a review. I'll go back to that. But I played 35 hours and I did a fair amount. Like I have maybe 14-15% of collectibles left. And I actually get told to me, like some people don't believe me. Because some people are at 50-60 hours and they're like not even at the third trial yet or something. How do you, from a developer, just you yourself, like, is it cool to see? I didn't rush. I want to make that like very clear. I did not rush. But there are some people that can beat this in 30-40 hours, and then some people 70, and they're not even halfway. Like, what's that like as a creator of it?
Well, you realize that you've got a lot of different players at different skills and different things that they're interested in. Some people like to just power through the main storyline, and they feel like, okay, I saw the main elements, and so I'm done with that game,
Right.
And then there are others, and I think in my mind, most of our players, most of our fans, um, they wanted to spend time at Hogwarts. They wanted to spend time in the Wizarding World, and so all of these collectibles and things that you can go, the Merlin trials, are there so that players have more stuff to do and spend more time in the world without impacting those people who just want to run straight through the main mission. So we're trying to serve, multiple masters. We're trying to make a lot of different people happy depending upon what their expectations are for the game. And it feels to me like most people are pretty pleased, even those who went straight through the storyline. I haven't seen too many people say, well, I think it's too short. One or two, I think, have said it's kind of short at 30 hours for the main.
Really?
Yeah.
It
only took me 17 hours to get through Monkey Island. So
yeah, I'm always in. I think, as you had said, even maybe on the first interview we ever did about, you're trying to go for a wide net. You're trying to get a lot of people. I've always tried to keep that in mind and it's easier too when you do create stuff and I say 35 and I see people say again, like, he must have rushed it. I'm 60 hours in. Well, I didn't stare at a portrait in Hogwarts for 14 hours. But I say that maybe as a jab, but I also say it fully knowing, and I've said this, leading into the game, I know people are going to do that. That's what makes it all games. You start to realize that maybe the more you've been around or the more you're online, people play games differently. And some people are going to stare and kind of like wander off, and some people aren't. And that's and Hogwarts appeals, I think, to both. Like you said, you don't feel cheapened. In fact, I love the length. I don't need the game to be. In fact, I wouldn't like the game if it's 80, 90, 100 hours. And I also just don't think a story can last that long. All those kind of things. It's very rare. The Witcher's main story length is long. It's a reason why it's like one of 5 that even has it that long. Is you can't do it. It's the elite of the elite. And so I never expected that from the first game of this caliber from Avalanche. Now the bar maybe moves up a little bit for the sequel, but yeah, I always just find that really interesting of people 70 hours. They're at the second trial. It's like, oh my, jabbingly, I really don't know what you've been doing for those 70 hours, but also knowing I get it, to a degree.
Spending a lot of time in the room of requirement, probably.
Yeah. That's because my wife's playing it. And that's what because she's 25, 26 hours. And I said, oh, you must be getting close. She's close to mine. And she said, well, I did she showed me the room of requirement, which is quite deep. And I said, honestly, I think I haven't told you that. Like, I really don't have a lot of interest. I kind of skipped the design. But that you could sink, I assume, dozens of hours just in the look.
Right.
And there's probably a bump in hours played right there alone, for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, at least, are enjoying that vivarium and raising their beasts, and so they'll spend 20 hours just petting their beasts and keeping them well fed, which is perfectly fine, right? That's a great way to play. If you're having fun with the game, then the developers have done their job, and the
was that a little bit. I've said like Animal Crossing, Dreamlight Valley. I mean, like, are those things that developers look at and try to do their own thing? Okay.
Yeah, we were looking at early on. What is the Stardew Valley? Stardew Valley. There was a lot of players in the studio beginning that were looking at Stardew Valley when they were first starting on the game.
That makes sense. Were there any plans of making the game a little bit more mature, adding blood, romance? Ooh, I like the romance one because I've always felt I understood the romance, opinion. What do you think?
I don't think we ever reached the point of there were plans for it, but we definitely was part of the discussions, right? And both of those things were like, how dark do you make the game? Can you have
Right.
blood and stuff in it? And then romance. Do we have romance in the game? And can you romance certain characters? And there was discussion about whether or not we should do that, what would be involved in doing that. And again, I think it just turned into a trade-off. Well, in order to do some good romantic lines, we're gonna have to pull away from something else.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't do romance in this game, and that's a place for expansion in a future title.
Yeah. I think that's another thing. There's room to expand a little bit of the classes. There's room to expand students, literal other students. Like at worst, the game still has a great foundation. That's what makes it, I think, really special. Um, did you ever brainstorm the idea of having Quidditch as a cinematic in the game? Ooh, that's clever.
The answer is yes. Yeah, there was times about, yeah, should we have Quidditch be like cinematic? You can't participate, but you could watch, or things could happen. Yeah, there was some discussion about that. Again, I think it just turned into, well, if you're gonna have it in the game, you're gonna want to be able to play it. It
Yeah.
starts to feel like you're taking things away from the player if they can't participate in something that they really want to. So again, it's just a tricky trade-off.
Yeah.
What are you going to include? What are you not? Yeah.
This one, what about Triwizard Tournament and Hogwarts Legacy 2? I want to
That'd be
ask
a cool
you,
place. Yeah.
yeah, I want to ask, when you create this game, right? Or not, I mean, it wasn't just you. When there's a talks of this game, is there like a sense to try to mimic some of the bigger things of Harry? So like because we mentioned Battle of Hogwarts and even like the file, and so many people have brought up Triwizard Tournament for this game, the one we already have, before it came out. I mean? Was there like a sense of, do we copy some of the most iconic, even like plot lines, make it our own, or doing what Hogwarts Legacy did, which is literally new story, right? Very original, something we have not. Well, yet again, the idea of like viewing it, let's say, without spoiling it, right? Viewing it, we've seen it's an Easter egg of sorts, right? It's in the lore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Where we started with design was thinking about the property in general, and then trying to come up with a list of all the fantasies. What do you want to do in the wizarding world? And
Yeah.
there's a huge list, right? The more you think about it, the more cool stuff you come up with. And so, Triwizard Tournament is definitely on that list, right? That's something that you would like. Oh, this would be really great. I want to experience this. And then you end up with the question, well, can we do it in this game? Yeah, probably not, because we're trying to do these 10,000 other things. So you put it on the shelf and say maybe in a future game. And that's how a lot of design decisions get made. It's not that the idea is bad. It's that in order to execute it and do it well, you're going to have to dedicate a team and some time to it, and you have to do that trade-off again.
Yeah.
Well, let's shelf that for now and do this thing instead over here. And so yeah, I see all these ideas like in reviews and stuff. People going,
Right.
"Oh, I wish they had this. I wish they had that. I wish they had wizard chests. I wish they had gobstones." I'm like, yes, I agree. We wanted
That's
all
one.
that too. Yeah.
That's one. I will take a Wizard's Chest DLC if they would to give me one.
Yeah, so like Wizard's Chess is one of those things that seems on the surface deceptively easy. Like, oh, you just get a chess engine, you just animate the pieces, and you're done, right? But then you start thinking, well, you're going to need an interface for how the players are going to interact. Not only do you have to animate all the pieces, but now you're probably going to want ratings, and so that different players are at different degrees of difficulty. You may want a tournament. You may want to track how people are doing stuff. You may want to have houses have tournaments, right? You start building on this sort of stuff. And pretty soon you're like, in order to really to make it really feel good, you have to invest quite a bit of resources. And I think that things like Wizard's Chess and Gobstones were in that ballpark of, well, we could do it, but we couldn't do it well enough that we want to dedicate the resources there so that it feels like it was kind of only halfway done. And I'm
Yeah.
afraid if we did Wizard's Chess, it might have felt like, oh, you can play it, but it's not that great. It
Right.
doesn't live up to the expectations there. Because I think you'd want all the other stuff. You'd want
Right.
players that are strong. You'd want a tournament. You'd want personalities. You'd want, all these sort of things around it. So.
Yeah. That's fair. I'll take that as a response. I still want it. I still definitely.
Yeah, and I still want it too, but I want it done well, right?
Yeah. No, that's true.
Yeah.
What do you think they could add as a new game plus? Well, I would go very generic and just you keep every. That's the easiest. You just keep everything. It's not I just played. I don't know if you ever played it, but it's a named game, Oxenfree. That New Game Plus on that is literally a second game. I don't know people's perception of what New Game Plus is. Most games, it's the exact same thing, and you just carry things over. The elites of the elite, and this is an indie game in Oxenfree, you can only pull it off there in terms of it's half a new game and half the same game, So that's kind of cheating the question, but
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what their plans are for New Game Plus. I put 100 hours into Marvel's Midnight Suns, so
yes.
I did New Game Plus on that one, and yeah, their New Game Plus doesn't really add too much to it, right? It just basically leaves everything unlocked and then
Yeah.
starts you back at ground zero. So there's kind of a what's the value of a New Game Plus? I guess it's so that
Well,
you
what's
can
your hot take?
experience
Should New Game Pluses be like mandatory? Do you like prefer game needs a new? I find as time goes on, they take hits at least online, like on Twitter, which the world doesn't revolve around. But if your game doesn't have New Game Plus, that tends to look more of a negative now, like as time has gone on.
Right. The bar has been raised. Everybody's kind of expecting it now,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not sure what they would do with the New Game Plus. I find that New Game Plus is best for me when I feel like the game feels like it's got a renewed challenge and I'm doing something different. Like Witcher's New Game Plus, I thought was fine because it was so much more difficult.
Right.
But I'm not sure what you would do with Hogwarts Legacy.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, it said Monday, September 1st, 1890, had September 1st on. Yeah, I think it kept the day of the week. I think it did say Monday, September 1st, which would place it in 8. That was another kind of hint. It still is the Monday historically on your calendar if you look back. It's a good call or a good catch. This is a good one. If you think they make a sequel, do you think we'll be waiting 6 to 7 years like we did for Hogwarts, or since they have the foundation, will the wait time be shorter?
I would expect a much shorter wait time because they'd be building from existing assets and I also wouldn't expect it to be like revolutionary in that the game's completely remade. It would be like building on the foundation, expanding it, just like you've seen in other sequel games.
Yeah, that'll be murky water from the people that want, like the same group of people that want everything. Which, by the way, at the same time, I sympathize. Like I try to, my channel's kind of for everybody. If you want to expect the world, you're fine. But you see what God of War from the negative side has taken, being so similar, right? I'm just throwing it out there. It's going to be interesting when it's not all that much different, and maybe people think it'll be but it's, I don't know. What do you think? Like, how do you? It's a little bit outside of Hogwarts, but like being in that developer mindset, have you kind of seen that where there's like the push pull of, well, you want games out in less than 5 years, they do have to be very. But at the same time, people do want more. Like I get both sides, to be honest with you. God of War Ragnarok is literally God of War Part 2. And to some, that's not good enough. And I get it. But yet again, you'd have to wait probably 8 years to get an actual, you know what I mean? So where are you on that?
It kind of depends on each property. For Hogwarts Legacy, if you were building a sequel, I think you've already got Hogwarts, the castle built, and I don't think anybody would expect you to rebuild the castle, although you'd improve it, right? Because it's still happening around the school. So I think that would be a time savings. But the expectation of players would be lots of new stories and new characters, and there would be a lot involved there.
Right.
My sense, just generally, is that for a sequel to Hogwarts Legacy, a couple to 3 years would be about the right time frame in my head without even knowing what they were planning on doing. Just, from a timing standpoint, if it came out like, 2026 now or something, Hogwarts Legacy 2, and then my expectations for it would be pretty high. That it wouldn't be just a rehash. It would be like lots of new stuff, lots of improvements, a lot of things that people have asked for would be included in those 3 years.
Yeah.
That's just ballpark of what I would expect, but I have no idea what they're doing. Right? Yeah. I'm just guessing at things.
Yep. No, that's honestly where I'm at with. I'm really happy. I'm pretty genuine with you. Even in the beginning, like I am very happy with this, and in so many ways, if you told me, specifically me, or maybe just other people as well, that this was the product, and you told me that 4 months ago, I would have taken this because again, like. It could have gone wrong. It didn't have to be. It's not perfect. It's definitely, That's why I
Right.
don't really believe in review scores. There is no 10 out of 10, that kind of garbage, in my opinion. But at the same time, it's very good. And I would have taken this all day long. Then you start to analyze it and you say, all right, here's some weaknesses. And I really have so much confidence based off what is in the game. They should be able to. And that's where maybe the harder grading is now on the sequel. There needs to be improvements now in these, not saying like I'm the boss, right? But like you expect certain things now to be a little bit higher. The companions, there shouldn't be one Sebastian. Let's make it more, right? Those kind of things.
Right.
If that's not in the sequel, there would be problems there. But I'm extremely happy with the game itself.
Yeah, I am too. I think that from the team at Avalanche, they really did want to deliver everything that they could, right? And so because they were aware of how much we had to keep scaling back and bringing stuff in and reducing, I think there was a sense on the team: have we removed too much? Have we
Yeah.
have we pulled too much out? And then seeing it still be very, very well received because it hits, I think, all those notes of the Wizarding World feel, right? That it feels right. It feels like you're in the Wizarding World in Hogwarts. And because we got that, all the rest of it, I think players are willing to forgive a little bit. Oh, there's
Right.
no Quidditch, there's no wizard chess, but that's okay
Right.
because all this other stuff is good and it feels right. And so I think that the choices that were made were right. But I do believe also that a lot of people at Avalanche are a bit surprised that it's being received as well as it is. I mean, I don't think anybody thought they were releasing a poor game by any
Yeah.
stretch, but I know there were some who were like, biting their nails. Oh, there's no Quidditch.
What?
They're going to kill us for no
Yeah.
Quidditch.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna ask,
Yeah.
you see, it's another thing that one of those like buzz headlines kind of things you see quite often. The whole talk of the creators or the creatives at the studio, the talk that the game is like it's so not confident that it's going to be good, right? Like the whole building's on fire until like 2 weeks before.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you, because I've also seen people say that's not how they've experienced game development. Where do you, now you weren't there the last couple years, of that. Do we even know if this game is going to be good? But your general sense, do you think they felt they were one of, like God of War, I think was one where the last month they pulled it together. Do you think they were like that too?
Yeah. I think that for Hogwarts Legacy, because of the way that Avalanche has built games in the past, right? They did Disney Infinity, they did Cards, they did a lot of these. There were a lot of smaller teams, and those small teams had a lot of autonomy to go and build what they want to do. Like when I was doing play sets, I could build a play set pretty much making all the decisions by myself.
Yeah.
Now with Hogwarts Legacy, it's everything. Everybody's got to integrate. Everybody from all these different places have to come together, and so there's a lot of growing pains in anything that you do is impacting somewhere else. So we have to communicate more. The whole game development process feels like it's slower because you can't make decisions as quickly,
Right.
because just due to the size and scope of the game. So I think that Avalanche went through these growing pains of trying to adapt a studio that was making small things into big integrated systems,
Yeah.
and that was probably one of the biggest challenges I think on
Yeah.
the game at all, was just learning how to make everybody work together and integrate. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much that kind of answers
No,
that
I was
question,
because
but
you
yeah.
see like I actually do watch end credits. Like I don't look at like every single name, but like for most games, I just generally I like to hear the music or whatever they do. But also now thinking of it from just the way I've thought about Hogwarts, there are so many people. Like I didn't even know WB Montreal helped, and they had like 50, 60, 70 people's names on there. Some of them have like five, right? There's just these random studios around the world. Like I was gonna maybe ask you, like, well, number one, is this maybe the biggest project you've ever done in your life? And number two, what's it like? I don't know if the official number, like sometimes Ubisoft says 2,000 people made Assassin's Creed. I don't know if the number's been given. I imagine 1,000 at least touched Hogwarts Legacy at some point. Like, what's it like having so? Because this is not a small game.
Right. Yeah, it was a tremendous game. It was really big. It does remind me in many ways of what was going on with Disney Infinity. We've I brought that up several times. I think in the mainstream, kind of the big press or whatever, they think of Disney Infinity as a small kids game, but it was actually it had whatever 20 some odd play sets in it across 4 years, plus all those toys that were developed. I have 5 patents that are on my wall now. So there was a lot of development that was happening on Disney Infinity that then carried over to Hogwarts, the skills and stuff that they learned from that,
Yeah.
brought forward. But at the same time, because Hogwarts was new for us, it wasn't Disney Infinity, it was something different. There was very much trying to fly the airplane at the same time you're building it, right?
Yeah.
Stuff's broken all the time, stuff doesn't work, it's hard to know if you're hitting the right marks. You can't even have somebody play it because it's too broken, right? And
Right.
that doesn't happen until late in the game when all the pieces finally start to gel together and you can make those intelligent kind of decisions about what's working and what's not.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the hardest part about working on Hogwarts Legacy was that it was so big and it felt like it was so slow to see progress because there's so much stuff going on at once
Yeah.
that it was hard to know if you were on the right track.
Yeah.
Whereas you get it earlier in other games.
Right. Yeah. I'm honestly, I mean, from a guy, a guy who doesn't know too much, I've learned over the years, but I can literally imagine that it's nuts. Whenever you hear that stuff from even like a Ubisoft or, for like some Star Wars properties, they literally have to wait to hear back, right, from like the lore department of like LucasArts of like what you're allowed to like. I can't imagine. And you think about how long, I don't know if they've ever said, and you don't have to say like how long the game's been in development, but so many years, and those are like individual days in those years. I can only like you have to probably have, correct me if I'm wrong, like a different head just to be able to tolerate it. As a viewer, as a consumer, we want it, but like making it, does it go like sometimes where there's like weeks of just like one tiny small thing because it's just so long you're working on the game. You know what I mean?
Yes. I think the hardest thing for developers, and I suspect it's for most developers, is the recognition that you can't do everything that you want to do. That you're running out of time, you don't have the resources,
Yeah.
you don't have the, whatever the problem is. And so you have to start making cuts. You have to you have to kill things that you've worked on or shelve them or say, well, this was great. I really liked what we were doing, but it doesn't fit. We don't have time to take it to full realization. So we're going to have to put that aside. And you can sometimes see months or weeks or even years. Sometimes the work gets pushed aside and you have to change things to reintegrate. And on Hogwarts Legacy, that happened quite a bit where people were exploring different ideas, things we wanted to do, and then realizing it didn't integrate well with other systems or other parts of the game. And so you'd have to shelf it, and people would be like very hurt, like, oh, I've worked on that so long and now we can't use it.
Right.
And that's painful. There are cutscenes and stuff that get lost or game mechanics that get dropped, but it happens for every game. This is not unique to Hogwarts Legacy. And I think it's good for players to recognize that it is very much managed chaos when you're working on a video game, because you don't know what you have until you play it, and you can't play it till you build it. So you're in this constant cycle of.
There's even literally today, there was a video on Jedi Survivor, Star Wars, with the double-bladed lightsaber, and Stig, I think, right, the game director, literally says that they were working on it for one, and they literally ran out of time, so they removed it. It's just a quick cutscene animation, and then they went back and picked it up and finished it. And so, but see, not many people pay attention to that. It's just what you have to kind of understand, right? As when the game sells 20 million people do not know, those kind of little things about. That's what makes it special. Again, that's why I've never been so hard on people that expect the worst, expect like everything, and because people will tell them, well, you're not allowed to have those expectations. I mean, it's them. I'm not you. I'm not in the same situation. If you're not as plugged in as other people, you're going to come at it from a different angle. There's no point in telling them, oh, you can't think that this game is going to be everything. You have to like lower your own expectation. That's not up to me to tell anybody else to, you know what I mean? That's how I've always tried to come at it. And that does lead to maybe disappointment, because then those people don't lower their expectations, and then they get hit with reality, but that's them. That's on them. Let's see. I saw one that said that you guys put Cyberpunk and Mass Effect Andromeda to shame. With the first, it's really incredible, the first attempt at this and like what is potentially possible for sequels. What game?
Yeah, I think put the Avalanche on the map now.
Yes. Well, so that's what I was thinking, even from like one of the things I've talked about with a sequel is I imagine, well, my expectations are higher. I think everybody's expectations probably rise. You imagine boatloads of money are just being like transported in, maybe bigger budget. They're allowed to hire. Like, I think what you can do in the future, do you think that this to other developers like shines a light on Avalanches? Like this is a place to go to. We can bring in the controversy even a little. Like, do you think that would scare people, or do you think just the care and working on such a huge game, do you think that's enough to get people to want to come in?
Yes, I don't think that Avalanche will have any difficulty in hiring folks, and even when the controversy was
Yeah.
going on, it in my opinion it wasn't impacting us hardly at all on the development side because it was happening clear over there in social media land.
Yeah.
And we're back, 20 years looking at the books and the films from the 90s and the early 2000s. And that's our canon, right? That's what we're studying. We're
Yeah.
not studying what's going on social media. Nobody cares. We're over
Yeah.
here, looking at what's going on from historic.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I don't think that most people on the team were really troubled by the controversy. It felt more like something the press was whipping up. Like, oh, there's a big controversy around the game, and wherever they're going, not to us. We're just making a Hogwarts Legacy game.
Yeah.
We're not trying to be controversial.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that because it's now on the map and people have seen the quality, that they will have no trouble getting hires or people wanting to work on the game.
Nice.
I really don't think that the controversy is that big of a deal for most players or for most fans of the Wizarding world. I think that it's actually kind of a small group
Yeah.
on the internet and Twitter that try and make it into a big controversy, and I just don't think
Again,
most people care.
Right.
Yeah.
You take steps back, and like even me touching at it in videos, which others haven't. But then you take a couple steps back and you say, well, again, 20 million people, let's say, so many of these people, first game, first PS5 game or Xbox Series X, right? So many people literally could care less. So yeah, when you do kind of separate yourself from like the fight or whatever, whatever you want to call it, you realize there's just so many people that probably, and I talked about this before with like even recognition. I mentioned like the end credits. We try to give respect to the people who make it. And I try to bring up, developers' names and all that stuff to try to like link things. But there's so many people that truly don't care. There's people that don't care that Avalanche, who's Avalanche that made this game? They're straight minded, right? They only care about the game. And honestly, in a lot of ways, that's beautiful. Like I'd argue that's a good thing because there's some people I guarantee that don't even know J.K. Rowling is the author that made it. They may just know Harry Potter. And they may
Right.
not care to take one step more to see the author of the book. And once you realize that not everybody thinks to connect all those dots, because you'll see sometimes developers even get mad of people that skip the credits. Oh, give the people the time they deserve, that made it. I generally agree, but at the same time, I'm not going to control people. Most people do not care. I assume there's statistics of people that watch the credits versus those that don't. And I assume the ones that don't is much higher.
So, kind of a fun thing about Avalanche credits. I don't know if you noticed this, but for as long as I've been there, Avalanche does their credits differently than most other game studios do. Most game studios list everybody by their title and their position, game directed by, and then they'll give the name, assistant to the director, and then they'll give the name, and, everybody has a title and then what they're doing. If you look at Avalanche's credits, they just do it by department, and it doesn't matter what your ranking was. It's just
right.
All the artists, bam, and they're all together. All the designers, bam, they're all together.
Yeah.
And they've done that for as long as I've worked there, that each game came out with this like, hey, we're all together on this as a team. You do have different roles when you're working on it, but when the game comes out, everybody had a role to fill, so everybody gets equal billing in the credits.
Nice.
And I think that's great. You see the interns right next to the directors or the leads.
Yeah.
And it's just fine because, Hogwarts Legacy could not have been made without some of our young blood coming in, some of our, interns and stuff that came in, made a huge impact on the game, and they were really, really important. So everybody that worked on it played a crucial role in getting the game done.
Yeah. Well, like I said to you, even like I'm very glad because some studios don't put people that leave, and that's a big kind of controversy with some of the biggest named Sony, Microsoft, like all this stuff. You leave people off sometimes with or not crediting. I think Bruce Straley for the Last of Us TV show, like that's kind of a big deal. He was one half of it. So I'm glad that it's something I kind of expected. I don't know who puts together, like whose decision it is, but if any of it comes from Avalanche, again, I have the same mentality of they care. They're going to do what they believe is right. So I was hoping. This one's interesting. Breaking news. Alan 2 just confirmed with IGN, because it is on the IGN Fan Fest thing. No DLC plans for now.
All right. Well, there you go.
I like to stir controversy that people lie all the time in game development. So I would like to just throw it out there that that doesn't have to be true.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, would you be shocked?
Wouldn't say that. Yeah.
Would you be shocked to hear like this was all they were going to do and there wasn't? Either way, I wouldn't be shocked. Like if you told me they got DLC like scripts and all that stuff, or they said, no, we're just going to do this. We have no idea what the future holds. I wouldn't be shocked for either of them.
Yeah, I would be shocked if they didn't do something with Hogwarts Legacy out of Avalanche. Like if they didn't build on it and do something else. I don't know what it would be, whether it's a DLC down the line or a sequel.
Yeah.
But it just seems like there's too much money there now. There's too much attention, and they've built this foundation. It would be kind of a miss to just let it all go and go somewhere else, right?
Well, how does that, like from your perspective, do you think they like wait, like you're not literally given a budget to continue, so you have to wait, or you know what I mean? Like, do you know how that works? Not for this, just like maybe in general.
In general, a lot of what's being decided for the next project comes from up the chain from the executives who are trying to determine when products need to land, and that's often a big part of this whole thing. Is they look at the schedule first, and they say we need to have products drop here, here, and here. How much time do we have? What do we think we can do? Which is why Avalanche was really good working with Disney, because Disney often had very strong schedules about where they wanted things to drop, and Avalanche could fit. Okay, we'll give you your game in 9 months. Here it is. We did that a few times. But now they've got this big property out there at Warner Brothers. I'm sure that the development studio now has a say in what do we do next. They can go back to WB and say, all right, we think you should go here. And WB is in that position of like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Because if they disagree, now the studio can start to have a little bit of leverage and say, well, we've got enough people here that we think this is the right direction, that maybe you should listen to us a little more. Right. So I
love it. Giving power back to the people, really. It's
power back to the development team. Yeah.
It's just Bane and Rising. What's the Dark Knight Rises? Do you think they'll add more spells? There's an easy one, for future things. How do you think?
Probably, yeah.
How do you, if you're there, put yourself back, how do you expand the combat for the next one? Like, because the more spells you add, the more people may think, well, you should just be able to, because I think there's still that thought, or there was before the game comes out, that when you memorize these spells, ideally in a perfect world, you would just be able to fire literally one after the other. There wouldn't be switching, but you have to think about it as a game, and you need 4, so when you keep adding more, if there's double the spells, or even say 10, 12 new ones, how do you, would you yourself, would you change the D-pad swapping? I always said I think the wheel maybe would be slightly easier than this if you keep, I think it's fine for what it is. But if you keep adding spells, I don't know if just 4 slots of 4 would work.
Those are great questions. I don't know until you experience it. You'd have to try it and try things out to see what felt right and what didn't. I think that they could add more spells, because then you could start to pair that up with different types of enemies.
Yeah.
And then so you'd have spells that work better against different enemies. And that's where I think that the expansion could come, is that you start to introduce new challenges and then have new spells that relate to those new challenges, along with your old ones being used in new and creative ways.
Yeah.
So your Leviosa and your Accio could be used with, other spells that are new in ways that you haven't seen before. It's so I think there's a lot of latitude in exploring different builds. You could go and have different build types, and people would be, I've got a fire wizard, or I've got an ice wizard, or whatever.
Yeah, that's kind of how I built it. I just put all fire and like heavy attacks all on. I mean, the color coding is somewhat already like a little nudge, but it's not that much of a nudge, because you can still mix and match. But if you put all 4 of each color with each other, yeah, you're in the ballpark of what kind of works. Again, it's kind of what makes it special. I do think some of the spells are very clearly more powerful or more useful overall. Like how do you say it? Confringo. That one is easily, in my opinion, the best one by like miles. Or Incendio. Those two are just sweet. But maybe I
Right.
just have a soft spot for fire.
Yeah,
You
well,
know?
that's I think that's often the case for a lot of people. But then you go and watch how people have gotten really creative already with their
True.
builds. Like,
True.
somebody goes into stealth mode and they make a whole bunch of chomping cabbages and they just wipe the field out without even turning
Yeah.
visible. I'm like, that's pretty clever, yeah. And
Yeah.
the Glacius Defendo or the Arresta Momentum, and then they jump on their broom and go over and
Oh my
Petrificus
god.
Totalis somebody,
Yeah.
that's frozen at a distance. So people are very creative with the spell system even as it exists. I just think more spells would allow for more creativity.
True. True. What are some other IPs or games you would like to see Avalanche tackle or do? Ooh, okay. So remove Wizarding World. What would you give them?
Oh, I really don't know. That's a tough question. The thing is Avalanche is a history of kind of Disney Imagineering, right? Because it
Yeah.
came from Disney, worked on a lot of stuff. I think almost any Disney property, there's still enough people in the studio that know and love Disney that they could take any Disney property and make it pretty awesome. Like, I don't know, you could do like a Mandalorian game or something.
Yeah.
Who knows? And I think they would do a really good job of
Yeah.
any Disney property.
Nice. I would float Pirates. I think Pirates of the Caribbean
Pirates
would
would be
be.
good. Yeah, I hadn't
Yeah.
thought of that, but that would be a really good
That,
one.
that
They'd kick ass at
I think. I mean,
that.
I look. If you gave me a budget right now, I would try my best to do a pirate. That would be my dream thing. But yeah, or Mandalorian's pretty cool. Well, the rumor is there could already be a Mandalorian game, in the works somewhere. Um, let's see. Good to have Troy back. Much love to him, guys. I think my idea about the wave based thing actually kind of I'm gonna make a video. I'll make a video specifically for it. Yeah, I really think because there was a talk of what do you think about like an MMO? There was always remember that EA story back in 2001 or whatever. Like I do think an MMO would work, but I've always just said I feel like that's the least amount of studios out there. Like there's not too many studios that make MMOs. The team that made DC Universe was given Marvel and they had to cancel it. So they weren't even they're like the go-to and they couldn't even do it. So I just think a Wizarding World MMO would work and would make so much money, probably a predatory kind of way, but I just think it would not happen. I don't see how a studio exists that can do it. But multiplayer just in general of waves, that kind of stuff, I think that works.
Yeah, I don't know. I think making an MMO in the Wizarding World would be a huge endeavor, a
Yeah.
really big endeavor to get it right, and also just the way that the world feels. It'd be strange to do some of those MMO things that we're used to doing, like raids with going out with 20 wizards to go
Yeah.
take down a big dragon or something. I don't know how it would work from that standpoint, but it might work pretty well if you focused in on certain social elements and a lot of things going on around Hogwarts. I don't know. I'm just speculating off the top of my head. I think an MMO is possible, but it doesn't readily fit with the property. You'd probably have to tweak it a little bit.
I've always said telltale episodic style is what I would. If I'm Portkey, who I think obviously did well here, but you really got to start branching out. And I know they do the mobile stuff. You really, in terms of this wizarding world thing, you got to keep going. I always thought pitch it to a thing like Telltale or Don't Nod or Deck 9, 5 episodes, 10 hours long. You are a student. It's similar to do you think Hogwarts Legacy kind of eliminates the idea of like that because it would kind of be close and in some ways it would actually be deeper in terms of like decision making, or do you think that would still be like on the cards you could do? I just feel like these, as you mentioned, simulation. If you did a Persona style Hogwarts thing, that'd be so much different than Hogwarts. I think both could exist. If you did a Telltale 10-hour, you're a student and you make these choices, that is kind of similar to what you've already, another studio, but it may be different enough to work.
Right. Yeah. You could go in either direction. I think Avalanche as a studio could go in either direction based on their history, right? They could do more of those episodic kind of quest based things, like you're saying, or they could take what they've already built and evaluate it and make more of a simulation direction too. Um, yeah, these are those difficult questions that they're probably wrestling with right now at the studio. Where do we want to go next? Yeah.
Yeah. What
Well,
about
I bet what they're actually doing is fixing bugs. I bet they're in there right now going, we got to fix this. We got to
did the
fix this. And there's this
PlayStation 1?
problem.
I don't think the PlayStation 1 went up, or did it? Because it was delayed. Honestly, and it's not even me being biased, I really didn't experience. Again, like, I get it. There's some people that have written to me, like, in comments about the game literally doesn't start for them, and it's like, man, that's firstly that sucks. To be honest with you, I think that's kind of an underrated thing with this game that I haven't even talked about because my experience kind of was fine. Like, it is well polished, way more well polished than most. In fact, when most open world games come out, you have to have that veil where you know that it's going to be broken, and you got to give it. I'm very much against that. I'm not going to give a game 2-3 weeks to fix itself. It should be fixed the day of. Maybe that's a little harsh, but whatever. But Hogwarts and Avalanche, I suppose, confident, attention to detail, also with the bugs too, because I think overall it's a pretty well functioning game.
Yeah, I've noticed bugs when I've been playing it, but they're
Okay.
mostly what we call sea level bugs, right? You know, they're minor bugs,
Yeah.
glitches and lighting and that sort of stuff that doesn't impact the player too much, but you notice it a little bit. So it feels reasonably clean to me. That being said, I totally agree that players should have an expectation of their game being in a good state when they buy it, right?
Yeah.
And it's
We've
a
gone
real
down a
letdown.
dark path with that mentality over the last
Yeah.
10 years.
So I totally I'm always disappointed when I pick up a game and it feels really buggy. And I'm really disappointed that it sounds like mostly the PC players are having struggles with
Yeah.
some configurations. I'm playing on the PC. I have a Steam version. I haven't had issues myself,
Yeah.
right? Nothing significant, more like C bugs and things. But for those players that do, I feel really bad for them. And I do think it's up to the studio to try and adjust and address those things as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
wonder, like PS4, Xbox One right around the corner, the Switch. I've always jokingly mentioned about like the Switch catching fire. That's going to be, I'm interested because the thing also that didn't get on my nerves because it was pretty flawless was loading. There were some time, you go to a door and you have the wheel, which is a little odd to see it in the world, but you see it and then you walk through. I am a little terrified, I'll be honest. But like, at the same time, I got to remove myself and say, well, to be honest with you, I don't really care too much because I'm not going to play it on PS4. But these PS4, Xbox One owners, I wonder how long they have to stand at the door to get to the next area. That's going to be interesting because I assume it's going to sell a couple more million at least on each of those systems, which is great. More money for them. But I wonder how it's going to run.
Good question. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not even.
It'll be
It's just me floating it out there.
yeah. It'll be a stripped down version, right? They'll reduce a lot of stuff, so maybe their load times will also come
True.
down. I don't know.
Yeah. What was the hardest, most time-consuming system or feature in the game that you worked on?
Yeah, so for me, the more difficult stuff was all the NPC behavior stuff, and like I said earlier, there are multiple tiers of NPCs, the basic ones, and then all the other ones up. We had really, really big designs for what we wanted to do with NPCs, right? And some of that stuff had to get shelved, some of it made it in. I think what you ended up in the game does a pretty good job of making it feel like the school is lived in and there's a lot of stuff going on and you can listen to those other characters. So I feel good with what we did get in the game, but here's what we got in the game and here's what we wanted to do. It's clear up here. And so the delta between what we wanted to do and what the game actually shipped with, in my opinion, was significant, right?
Yeah.
We wanted a lot more depth and interest in those NPCs than what we were forced to ship with. Of course, I wasn't there the last 2 years.
Right.
But
yeah, it's tough. It's like you said. I mean, it's a push pull. I really, in the first couple hours of playing it, you hear students kind of just organically telling these little stories, like they're sitting on the ground and it's so cool. Like it's because honestly, again, I have been pretty harsh on it leading into it. I wasn't sure. And I don't think it's like amazing, but again, the characters, the actual NPCs, the livable Hogwarts actually is more well done than I thought. But you catch those little things every now and then of just these little conversations. A thing I talked about, actually, I would like your opinion on this. the talking in this game. I mentioned in a video, I believe an underrated feature is there's not too much of it. Games can get, bogged down in when you're talking with I'm talking, I guess, maybe specifically quest givers, but I would say even those little things, just, random students on the ground, they're yelling at, I think the first example was Peeves did something to somebody. They knocked books down, and it's like a 1-minute conversation. It doesn't overstay its welcome. Do you think, you playing through it, the quests, there's not too much to say. You're not there for 10 minutes per character. That stuff gets very boring to me specifically. Do you think that was trying to, like, the whole catch-all thing? Like, they know people have bad, they can't concentrate for too long, or because I think it worked out honestly perfectly, whether they planned it to be short or they wanted more conversations and the budget didn't allow for it. I actually would still say triple the budget, keep the dialogue at a minimum, because I think it was really well done.
Yeah, I think again it was kind of that balancing act, because you wanted to have enough in the school that it felt, rich and you could hear the stuff going on around you. But at the same time, yeah, there's too much of it. Like what Ignacio Wildsmith, the Flu Flame lady, she talks every time, and everybody's like making jokes about it now. Like, how do you shut her up? So it's just kind of finding that right balance so that it feels like what you hear is enough. I am really pleased though with what we did get in the game, that stuff that you overhear, that kind of richness, because that's not gameplay, right? That's just ambiance. If you don't pay attention to it, you don't even notice it. Right. So I'm happy that we got as much of that in the game as we did for those players who take the time to listen. They're going, oh, look, these students are talking about what's going on in Sharp's potions class. And I like to hear that. It makes it feel like I'm really living in the world. And if anything, I wish we had more. Like, I wish there was more richness to the NPCs, but there are limits. So
no, totally. And like I said, I think even quest givers, instead of 8 questions you can ask them, there's 3. And some people have complained about it. Maybe there's not enough. Honestly, I look at it and I always throw this game under the bus, even though I genuinely like it. Horizon Forbidden West, one of my favorite games of last year. Aloy can talk forever. And these characters, you can ask them 15 questions. And it's a really, like, Horizon's world, the lore is pretty deep. And if you go into it of like what happened, historically, it's a cool little backstory. But I mean, you can talk to a character for like 5-6 minutes, and then you can talk to another character directly next to them for 5-6 minutes. It's too much. To me personally, it's way too much. I think generally, I've seen it online, people weren't pleased with it. Hogwarts is not that. The characters, they say what they want to say. You can still have some backstory. Even shop owners, they'll talk just for a little. You get a little sense of who they are, and they shut up. And I think that's perfect, honestly. And my friend here, Steven of Craven Something Scary. Yes, man. This is now this is a guy, horror stuff. He covers Scream a lot. Great guy, by the way. Go subscribe. And I've got him turned on to some horror games, but this is actually like a prime example of someone who wouldn't buy a lot of games. I'll speak for him. That I do think would be into a game like this. So yes, Steven, buy this game. Flu Flame lady gets annoying. Actually, I didn't really have so many issues with her as other people. My wife doesn't like the math puzzles, but that's because she doesn't like to add. I like to add, and so I really enjoyed it, to be honest. I really enjoyed listening to NPCs following them. Well, here, what we'll do here, we're approaching 2 hours, so we'll end it at the 2-hour mark. So if there's any, why don't we do, I tend to do this in the live streams. If there's any like yes or no questions, there's some of the quicker things to have Troy do. So Troy, while we maybe try to build up some yes/no questions for the last 5 minutes, any final thoughts you'd like to say about your experience or the game?
To me, this game is a lesson in what you can do when you respect your fandom. And if there's anything that I think the industry can take away or that players can take away, is that we need to get more cooperative between developers and players about exploring these worlds. So that's kind of, to me, the big lesson of Hogwarts Legacy. Developers, players cooperating together to have this really great experience. I'd like to see more of that in other future titles. And I feel like we've got this wall built between us where a lot of times developers, or really it's players are skeptical of developers. They think developers are lying to them or they're not representing. And I feel like we should try and fix that problem on the developer side. Like Chandler was great being a community manager, just reaching out, letting people know that you've got a development team that's trying to do something great for you as players. And then they have a lot of gratitude for you that you're going to come and play it, and so that you could experience all the work they've done. Just that's what I hope Hogwarts Legacy does, is it builds bridges between players and developers. That's really what I hope people come away with.
Yeah, no, it's I think if you paid attention to it literally at all throughout its whole life cycle, beyond that year and a half of like darkness and the delay and stuff, that was probably how not to do it. Once they came back, they were honestly the models of how to do it. But you're right, like just I would like jokingly jab at them sometimes when they do these very small little posts or they show one creature or whatever. But again, I always looked at it from kind of both sides, where it's like, all right, you want to do daily posts, so you're kind of like filling time by giving us the small stuff. But on the flip side, you're in a truly unique situation where other games can't do this. Again, I'll go to Atomic Heart just because it comes out Tuesday. You don't have the background, you don't have the lore, you don't have the fandom to do these daily posts that a lot of them are kind of meaningless. Like they're not going to like drastically do anything for anybody. But why not lean into it? You get a couple thousand likes, you get the jump thing, like the whole joke of jumping in the game. Those things organically happen because of it. And if you're quiet your whole, you know what I mean? Or you take, there's nothing necessarily wrong with being quiet. Other developers do it, but this is how you look at this. I don't know how well you can do this for every game, again, because of the background of it. Not every game comes into it with a Harry Potter fandom. So it is a little unfair to say every game should do it. But in terms of respect and cutting out those middlemen of, like you said, I liked how you say it. Like what you say, they try to like warp, or they tell you how to feel about the product. How'd you say about like IGN?
They interpret things for you. They go they go and interpret the game and tell you what you're supposed to think about it in their articles, rather than just telling you what the game is. They're like, this new game coming out, here's how everybody needs to feel about this. Right. And I'm like, no, they don't. That's not the press's job to tell everybody how they should feel about a game.
Right. You take that part out and you replace it even just with, like, for me, I replace it with opinions. I'll tell you what it is, the details, and then I'll tell you how I feel, and you can think whatever you want.
It's perfectly acceptable to say, here's the facts, and now here's an opinion part on it, and now here's somebody else with a different opinion. That's good journalism. You get different perspectives, you get the facts, you do all that. Which, bad journalism is like that Wired 1 out of 10 article, which is like, I'm just going to attack the game because I don't like JK and I didn't even bother to play the game. I mean, that's how that thing reads. And you're like, okay, this isn't journalism. This is an opinion piece masquerading as a review.
I personally loved it. It gave me a free video to bash it. It's it's fun.
That's the silver lining, something to bash.
It's just content. All right, man. Well, I think we were questioned out. I think everybody got the general comments to you. Well, I mean, truly, I say it again. Thank you personally, for being on for all this time. Kind of maybe a blessing of all the stuff that happened to you, a few years back. But no, I mean, you rock the crowd, the chat, but just people in general. I mean, I think you get a lot of, good positivity your way. So thank you for being on. And I said this, before and during. Thank you for what you did for the game. Not as like a kiss up, but again, like, this is an important game that I think if you're part of the community, for me personally, talking about it since 2018, like, it's surreal that it's even out. I don't think anybody owes each other anything. I don't think I owe Avalanche or Avalanche owes me, but it's been an amazing journey. And it turned out, factually, in my opinion, it turned out way better than I thought it was. I thought it was going to be good, but I didn't think it, I thought the sales were going to be probably what it was. I think I was right with a lot of my predictions, but I think the game's bar is way higher than I thought it was going to be.
Well, thank you for those kind words, and also, thank you for your support on the game and for covering it, and thank you to all the players too. All you guys, again, the game wouldn't exist if it weren't for the players. So really, everybody should pat themselves on their back because you're part of this experience, right? You're
Yeah.
part of the whole Hogwarts legacy phenomenon. The players is what made the game do as well as it did, and it's what drove the team to build the thing. So
Yeah.
power to the players.
Thank you for the super chat, by the way. No comment, just the money. No, truly appreciate it. Thank you all. Like Troy said, thank you all for watching the content, for buying the game, all that stuff. Even though I'm not here to necessarily sell the game, but no, I appreciate everybody here. I know Troy does too. Thank you all so much. Boy, I don't know what we'll do in the future, but I do very much assume there'll be a Hogwarts Legacy too. So we'll catch you all on the next live stream.
Bye.